This is part 5 of my 2020 tomato growing series for complete beginners, and here we are, and it is finally harvest time. So in today's video I'm going to give you 3 tips for harvesting your tomatoes and keeping them healthy so you get lots of fruit throughout the season. Welcome back to Grown Frugal. I'm Susan, and today we're here at last in part 5 of this series, which is all about the harvest. And I was really nervous when I did this series because it's live. This is not last year, this is this year, and I didn't know how it was going to turn out or whether I would have any tomatoes to show you by the time we got to part 5. So what a relief, we have got lots of tomatoes. And from February to here it was so worth it, because now I've got lots of tomatoes here. I've already been harvesting. We're going to harvest some more today, and I'm going to show you 3 ideas to think about as you're harvesting. So firstly, we're going to think about when to harvest, how to know when your tomatoes are ready to be picked. And then secondly, we're going to think about what can I do to keep the plants healthy so that your harvest lasts longer. And then thirdly, I'm going to show you how to ripen your tomatoes indoors so you can leave your plants to get on with doing the job that they do best, making you more and more tomatoes while you give them a little assist indoors to finish off the ripening. And you know what, this has been a really difficult year, and I've not been able to lavish attention on the tomatoes like I would normally, and they've still come through. So it just shows you that even when circumstances are difficult or you feel you're too busy, as long as you can bring an attitude of like curiosity and not worry too much if things don't work, then it's really worth a go growing your own vegetables. Some of these tomatoes are just in little pots, or even if you've got a small garden, it is worth it. So if you're interested in starting out growing food like tomatoes, or you're interested in learning how to cook a little bit more frugally, do subscribe, and if you hit the bell you'll get an alert every time I upload a video. So let's get on and show you these 3 tips for harvest time. So tip number 1 is about when should I pick my tomatoes. So you can see with these plants here that I've got in the greenhouse, these cordon tomatoes, I've let these sit on for quite a while and they're fully red, and it's kind of obvious they need picking. So to pick them, twist them and give them a little pull, and off they come. Now, if when you first start to pull the tomato and giving it a little twist, it doesn't feel like it's going to come off, but you can tell it's fully ripe, all you have to do is just take a little pair of snippers and just snip them off. And what you're trying to avoid is really tugging at the tomato plant, because what can happen is that you may just pull the branch down and it might lose contact with the main stem. So be very careful when you are picking them. Most of them will just come off straight away when they're fully ripe, but let's move on to picking them when they're not fully ripe, when you definitely may need your snippers. Now, it's amazing to pick tomatoes when they're very ripe and to eat them straight away, and you'll always get the best flavour when you've just taken them off the vine like that. But if you're looking to get a bigger crop, it can be really useful to pick tomatoes just before they've reached that final red point or orange point or whatever colour they are. And so I've got an example here for you. So you can see on this bush tomato, we've got this one here is very green, you can tell it's not ripe yet. But this one on the left is blushing, so it's already started to turn that yellowy colour. Now, tomatoes ripen from the inside out, so once they've reached this blushing stage where you can see the colour coming, you're very safe to take this tomato off and ripen it indoors. So for these, they probably won't just come off the stem very easily, so I would always use the snippers with those and just pop them off. So there it is, and I'm very confident this one is going to ripen indoors within a couple of days. So my second tip for harvest time is to keep your plants healthy. Now if you look at this, there's lots of tomatoes on the plant. It's in a relatively small pot, but these are very big tomatoes. And what you can see here is what looks like wilting. And if I didn't know better, I'd think I hadn't watered these enough. But actually what's happened is that I haven't got enough support in this plant. So let's see if we can get closer. So what's happened here is that the weight of the tomatoes on the branches has made the branch pull away from the main stem, and this branch is essentially dead now and these tomatoes won't ripen. So don't be like me. Pay attention to supporting your tomatoes and make sure they've got a good framework around them. So if they do come up with these massive tomatoes like this plant, that the weight doesn't get too much for those branches and they don't end up falling away. So if you see some wilting on your tomato plants and you feel like you've watered them, it may be that this is happening, so get in there quick. I sometimes, if I caught them very early and tie the branch up so that the stalk comes back together with the main stem, sometimes the tomatoes have kind of formed a scab and been able to live and carry on growing. But on this occasion, I'm afraid that these ones have gone and this branch will need to come off. And now I'll just make sure the rest of those are supported so the rest of the plant doesn't do the same thing. And we've got plenty more fruit where those came from on this little pot. And harvest time is a good time to be checking your plants, checking for these support issues, but also just making sure you're getting the watering and feeding right. So all over the season, as your tomatoes are growing, continue to water, continue to feed, help those plants stay strong and keep on producing for you. I tend to give a really good water twice a week rather than giving a little sprinkle every day, and that helps your plants stay healthy. You can mulch your pot, put something on here to keep the water in once you've watered them and stop it evaporating on these lovely sunny days. And a quick tip, sometimes you pick what looks like a ripening tomato and it looks really perfect, but when you turn it over you notice this kind of pattern on the bottom. So when you see this pattern, that's called blossom end rot, and probably down to inconsistent watering. Sometimes it's to do with soil deficiencies, but for whatever reason it is, this tomato is no good. So as soon as you see one like this, just get it snipped off and put it into the compost. It's fine for that. But that, again, that allows for the tomato plant to focus on the healthy tomatoes and not put more energy into getting this one ripe, because it's not going to be eaten. So here's some tomatoes ready for ripening. So we've got some ripe ones here at the bottom, an orange tomato and 2 red varieties. And then you can see I've got a range of tomatoes here that need to get finished off ripening indoors here. Now you can ripen tomatoes on a windowsill, but I would say be very careful if you're doing that, because it's quite easy for the sun to scorch them, especially here in midsummer. And I prefer this method of putting them into a paper bag. And what I'm doing is putting the underripe tomatoes into this paper bag. Let's do the orange ones, that one's nearly there. And then within there I will put in a very ripe tomato with them. And then I'll just close up the bag and check on that tomorrow morning, and they'll probably be ripe by then, but if not, over the next couple of days they'll just start ripening very quickly. So I'm using a ripe tomato to do that. You can also use a banana if you have bigger bags than me. So banana gives off an awful lot of, I think it's called ethylene, which is what is helping to ripen your tomatoes. And here's one I did earlier. And you can see that they have all ripened. It's even ripened up this really big tomato, which 2 days ago was just like the one I put in there. Isn't nature amazing? So let's leave these to ripen and decide what to do with these. So that's our harvesting done, and in the next video I'm going to show you how to cook and preserve your tomatoes so they last more than a few days. That's if you've got any left, of course.